Hi beauties, welcome to my channel, Refining Beauty, where we focus on faith plus clean beauty and lifestyle. With me, Yanni Michelle. And today I'll be sharing with you one of my favorite clean beauty products that I'm using right now. In honor of my book, Make the Most of Your College Years, A Primer for Success. I'll be talking about healthy and unhealthy boundaries based on the book Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. So be sure to like and subscribe to this channel and buckle your seatbelts and let's get started. Hi beauties, welcome back to my channel. So on today's good news topic, we are talking about boundaries. I think boundaries is one of those topics that it's not talked about often, but it should. It should be, because it can alleviate a lot of the stress and issues that we have in our relationships when it comes to friends, at our workplace, when it comes to family, and even in our own personal life. Sometimes we do have to set boundaries for ourselves as well, especially if you're in college, struggling in certain subjects. And so you're probably thinking, what is boundaries? What does that mean? I need definition, Yanni. So that's why I'm here. Boundaries means boundaries is the line or plane indicating the limit or extent of something. And so if I could just make it plain, I put that boundaries is where it's basically your stop and go sign. Boundaries is your stop and go sign. And that could be in any type of relationship, like I just said. That could be in your friendships, that could be with dating, that could be with family, that could be in finances, that could even be for yourself. And so you'll press stop on anything that's going to cause you stress, anything that's going to cause drama, anything that will just send you spiraling out of control emotionally. And then you turn on your go sign, you know, when it's good stuff and stuff that comes from love, stuff that comes from love that, you know, will bring you peace, things that will bring you joy, things that will bring you happiness as well. That is what you will press go on. That's what I would press go on. Things that make me happy, in short. And so if I can give an example from the Bible, God created boundaries. When I was just praying and asking God, I'm like, okay, God, you know, tell me scripturally about boundaries. And so he just, you know, enlightened me on the book of Genesis, of where he set boundaries with creation. You know, he had morning and nighttime. He had daytime and nighttime. He had seasons. He had fall, winter, summer. And they don't collide. They don't collide. They are set boundaries that God had in place. You know, God has boundaries even on the ocean. You don't see the ocean crashing on land and going as far out as it wants to. God put a boundary like, no, the ocean starts here and it ends here. And he even gave us boundaries. He said in his word that God gave Adam dominion over the earth. That means he has given us dominion. And so he set boundaries on earth. We will rule and reign on earth. God rules and reigns in heaven. Can I tell you, those are boundaries. Those are examples of boundaries. And so even if he does it, if God did it in the beginning of Genesis, surely boundaries need to continually be set in place, you know, in us, through us, and even around us when it comes to relationships as well. And so that brings me to the book of Boundaries, which I read. And actually, I listened to the audiobook. I listened to the audiobook, and it was so enlightening for myself. And so if you have read it, let me know what you think. If you have not read the book Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud, make sure you go get it. Make sure you read it, whether you read it or listen to the audiobook like I did. It is very enlightening, and it just allows you to be more intentional about the boundaries that you set. And so if I could convey to you what this book was about in a nutshell, the book Boundaries provides biblical backed tips and teachings on when to say yes and also when to say no. And I was actually just listening to a YouTube channel, and this couple basically said the greatest leverage that you can have in negotiation is saying no. And so a lot of times we always think that no is a bad thing. But I feel like even in the book Boundaries, it basically just says that saying no is sometimes a good thing. Saying no is a good thing. And so I just want to let you know today, saying no is not bad. It is okay to say no, especially if it brings you peace, it brings you joy, and it brings you happiness. I have here the simple, most effective boundary that you can establish is no, which is what I just said. It's okay to say no. No is not a bad word all the time. Setting boundaries involves taking responsibility of your choices. It says we are in control of our choices no matter how we feel. So you have a choice. You can say yes, you can say no. Is your no going to bring you happiness? Then say no. Is your yes going to bring you pain? Then say no. And so that's one of the tips that I got out of it. And then Dr. Henry Cloud also says that setting boundaries in our mind, which we talk about a lot. I've talked about the mind a lot in previous episodes in this series. So if you haven't checked it out, make sure you do that. Just a little note. But he basically says those boundaries includes how we think about our thoughts. Also, setting boundaries in our mind involves growing in knowledge and expanding our mind through God and His Word. So we cannot grow and expand if we don't have a relationship. And so just to add in there, if you don't know God, get to know Him. I have the prayer of salvation in the description box, so make sure you go and listen to it. So make sure you're continuing to grow in your relationship. And then also, he says that boundaries involve clarifying distorted thinking. And can I tell you that includes wrong thinking as well? Boundaries, you need to think about what you're thinking about. That's what Joyce Meyer says. And you need to think about, am I seeing this situation wrongly? Am I seeing this situation from God's point of view? That goes back to the number 2, understanding who God is. You need to ask yourself, am I seeing situations from His heart, from His mind, from His perspective? If not, then you need to pray and ask God to help you see things from His perspective. And then setting boundaries and maintaining boundaries takes work. Can I say hallelujah to that? Can I say amen to that? It takes work. So that means you have to be intentional. You have to be intentional about setting boundaries. And I like how Dr. Henry Cloud says that throughout the Bible, God talks about self-control, which means He gives us free will. You know, it even says in His Word, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And in different translations, it says, and self-control. And so we can either embrace fear and say, yes, fear, come in and have your way, and I'm going to have a panic attack. Or you can put up your stop sign and say, no, I will not allow fear to rule over me. I will not allow fear to rule over my mind. And so that's where you're putting that boundary up. And can I say that's a spiritual boundary that you're putting up for the enemy? Like, no, fear will not come in and have its way today. I'm putting up boundary and putting a hard stop on that. And so God has given us free will and self-control, which, like Dr. Henry Cloud says, it takes work to do. And so just give yourself grace as you're going through this process. And then he also says we are responsible to others, not for, to others, and for ourselves. And so he even went into the story of how we allow other people's situations to be our situations. We allow people's drama, people's complaining. We grab a hold of it and we can involve ourselves when we really don't need to be involved. Sometimes God, yes, will give us grace for certain situations, for friends, for family members, but oftentimes, I would say sometimes, but I would say most of the time, He does not, you know? And so that's where wisdom and discernment come in. And you have to pray, okay, God, have you given me grace to, walk my friend through this issue? And if He says no, then ask Him to show you what to do. It may just be praying for that person. It may be just sending scriptures, but it doesn't mean that, you're going to take on her burden for yourself. Because can I tell you that at times it can pull you down emotionally, especially if you're already going through issues and situations of your own. So it does take wisdom to know whether or not that you take responsibility for others' issues, other people's issues, other people's faults and complaints. And so he uses a reference from Galatians chapter 6, verses 1 through 5, and it reads, "Let everyone be devoted to fulfill the work God has given them to do with excellence, and their joy will be in doing what's right and being themselves." And here's the kicker, and not being affirmed by others. And so if I can just, when I think about that second half of the passage, I'm just reminded that a lot of times we don't set up boundaries because we're afraid that we'll hurt somebody's feelings. And it says, and not being affirmed by others, not being approved by others, not allowing the opinions of others to manipulate our boundaries or to keep ourselves from putting up boundaries because we care how they feel about us. If I could, and I basically summarized it, I put a note for myself that boundaries is a form of stewardship. Stewardship means that you're taking care of what God has given you. Stewardship is about trust. Because God can trust you, you could be a good steward. You're being a good steward of what he's giving you. And that includes friendships, relationships, your job, and even your own self, even your own body, your mind. And so that's what boundaries also includes as well. And if I can repeat it again, setting boundaries for yourself and others includes stewardship. It is a form of stewardship. And just two more points I have here, that boundaries are not a wall. So that it doesn't mean that you can't come in at all. He basically says you let in the good. He said it's basically like a gate. You can let in, you can decide when you let in the good, and you can close the gate to what's bad. And then I like the last point that I wrote down. Boundaries now ensures resentment in the future. So if you don't close that door on certain relationships or put boundaries up for certain relationships, are you going to be resentful? Are you going to be bitter? If that's the case, then you need to set boundaries now. You need to set boundaries now so that it won't get you or your relationship in trouble in the future. And so in closing, I just encourage you, once again, set boundaries for yourself and also others. I also encourage you to write out your boundaries and place it somewhere that you see it often. I don't care if you put it up in your phone. I don't care if you write it on a sticky note and put it in your mirror. Go over it, look at it, so that you can hold yourself accountable. You can even share it with other people. If you need to set boundaries in a relationship and you don't know how to convey it verbally, write a letter, send an email, and enforce it. Enforce those boundaries. And so in addition to that, what are your non-negotiables? And that could be in college life, that could be personally, that could be as you transition into adulthood. What are those boundaries? What are the non-negotiables? Is it, every day I'm going to wake up and spend time with God before I go to class, because that is my non-negotiable. I have to maintain our relationship. Not even maintain, but I want to have a healthy relationship. I want to have a abundant spiritual walk with God. I want to get to know him better. So because of that, I'm going to set aside a specific time every day to talk to God. I'm going to set aside a specific time to do my homework. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to say no to chocolate after 10 o'clock. And boundaries, just know it could be as simple as boundaries when it comes to food. If you know that you want to lose weight in 2021, then you need to set boundaries of what you're going to eat and what you're not going to eat. You can set boundaries and say, okay, during the weekday, I'm going to eat healthy. On the weekends, I'm going to splurge and have some ice cream. Those are boundaries. Those are healthy boundaries. And then when it comes to relationships, if you're dating, if you know that you have a temper and you explode and God is working on you, then If you know that somebody is making you angry, then your boundary is, okay, when I get upset, I'm going to tell that person I'm upset. I'm going to have a moment to myself and just breathe, pray, talk to God, and then we can have an adult conversation. That is a boundary. And that's a boundary that I believe you need to convey to that person as well. So those are boundaries, that realistic boundaries that you can set in place. So once again, if we could go over it, number one, what are your boundaries? What are your basic practical boundaries? And number two, what are your non-negotiables? And I'm just even thinking like in the dating world, like my non-negotiable is I wouldn't date someone outside of my religion, because my faith is so rooted and so strong in God. If you are not a Christian, then we cannot date. If you are not a Christian, then we cannot, because dating to me means that at some point we're dating for marriage. Like we're dating for marriage. And so I cannot be unequally yoked to someone who is not of the same religion to me. That's a non-negotiable. And so those are the non-negotiables that you need to think about for yourself. And I'm just giving you an example for me personally, but you may just want to ask yourself, what are my non-negotiables when it comes to dating? What are my non-negotiables when it comes to going out with friends? Like, I'm not going to drink. Maybe you had a bad experience going out one night and you're like, you know what? Because I have self-control, which we talked about earlier, I'm only going to have one glass of wine, or I'm only going to have a glass of wine at home. I'm not going to drink while I'm out, because I know what happens when I do. I become irresponsible. I become more rational. So, and let me tell you, I've had those nights. So in any case, in college, by the way. But again, it's just, I couldn't stress the importance of boundaries. And I believe that setting boundaries is a topic that is definitely essential, for those of you that are in college, transitioning into college, and even right out of college. You're still learning, you're still transitioning into adulthood, and setting those boundaries and healthy boundaries, once again, will alleviate stress, promote peace, and promote joy, and also happiness as well. So I always like to provide supplements when it comes to various topics. So I believe one of the best books that you could read when it comes to boundaries is the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs is full of wisdom. So that's a book where I believe you can gain a lot of knowledge when it comes to boundaries. The second book is, of course, the book that I just read, the book that we just talked about, Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. The awesome thing about this book is that he has done it's basically a series of books. So there are specific topics when it comes to boundaries. He's written a book on boundaries when it comes to marriage, when it comes to dating, when it comes to kids, if you have kids, when it comes to the workplace as well. So you may want to check it out and see if there's a specific topic to you. If not, then you can read the regular book, or his first book on boundaries, which pretty much he talks about in a broad spectrum. He does touch on family, he touches on friendship, and also the workplace. But I believe the other books he specifically talks about and hones in on in those books. So if you're not sure which book to read, just get the general book on boundaries and then decide from there if you want to read the other ones. And so my prayer for you today is for God to give you the wisdom, discernment, and also the enlightenment to set boundaries, to set healthy boundaries, and to give you the wisdom to not allow people to cross your boundaries, and even for you not to cross your own boundaries as well. If you're not sure where to start when it comes to setting boundaries, of course, pray about it. Ask the Holy Spirit to be your guide, and He will. And so I hope this message blessed you. If it did, make sure you like and share it with others. Also, just be sure to subscribe to my channel. I have some awesome things coming up in the new year in 2021. So make sure you join the community, turn on the notification, and you'll see all the updated and new episodes coming up in January. So take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.